The moment her hands began to move, the entire restaurant seemed to forget how to breathe. At first, it was just another busy afternoon in a bright, sunlit fine dining restaurant filled with clinking glasses, polite laughter, and the low hum of conversations drifting through the air. Sunlight poured in through tall windows, reflecting off white tablecloths and polished silverware. No one noticed the shy waitress standing near the entrance, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes downcast, rehearsing her steps in her mind the way she always did before approaching a new table. But in the next few minutes, that same quiet girl would leave a room full of powerful people stunned into silence and remind everyone watching that kindness, when it is genuine, can change lives in the most unexpected ways. If you believe stories like this still matter in today's world, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel Good Deed Stories. Your support helps keep these moments of humanity alive. Her name was Elena Mercer, and she had always lived on the edges of places, not invisible exactly, but never fully seen either. She worked daytime shifts because the sunlight made her feel braver. Nights reminded her too much of loneliness. At 22, she had already learned how to survive quietly. She spoke softly, moved carefully, and apologized even when things were not her fault. Customers often mistook her silence for a lack of confidence, but in truth, Elena carried an entire world inside her, shaped by loss, patience, and a language most people never bothered to learn. Years earlier, Elena's younger brother had been born deaf. Their small apartment had once been filled with sound, but gradually, it became a place of gestures, expressions, and understanding beyond words. Elena learned sign language not from a textbook, but from bedtime stories signed under dim afternoon light, from arguments settled through exaggerated hand movements, and from laughter shared without sound. When illness took her brother far too young, the language did not leave her. It stayed in her hands, her memory, and her heart, but she stopped using it openly, afraid that touching that part of her life would reopen wounds she barely managed to carry. The restaurant manager often reminded staff that wealthy guests were different, that they expected perfection, speed, and silence. So when the hostess whispered that a billionaire investor had arrived with his elderly mother, tension rippled across the room. Servers straightened their backs, adjusted aprons, and glanced nervously toward the table bathed in natural light near the windows. The son looked composed, confident, dressed sharply, the kind of man used to command. His mother sat beside him, elegant and calm, her eyes observant but distant, as though she were watching the world through glass. Something felt off almost immediately. The host spoke, but the woman did not respond. Menus were placed, yet she looked to her son for guidance. A subtle discomfort passed across the table, unnoticed by most but not by Elena. She recognized the signs the way one recognizes a familiar melody. The woman was deaf. As other servers hesitated, unsure how to handle the situation, Elena felt her heart begin to pound. She knew what silence like that felt like. She knew the exhaustion of being surrounded by voices that never reached you. Without fully understanding why, she stepped forward when her manager hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly, but her feet kept moving. Approaching the table, Elena felt the sunlight warming her skin. She placed the menus gently, then did something she had not done in years. She lifted her hands and signed a greeting, slow and respectful, the way she had once been taught. The change was immediate. The elderly woman's posture shifted. Her eyes widened, then softened. Her hands rose instinctively, responding with careful, emotional movements that carried gratitude, surprise, and relief. What began as a simple greeting became a quiet conversation unfolding in plain sight. Around them, conversations faded. Nearby guests paused mid-bite. Even the billionaire son leaned closer, confusion giving way to astonishment as he realized something profound was happening that he could not hear. Elena translated gently, her voice steady though her chest felt tight. The woman had said it had been years since someone spoke directly to her in her own language without being asked. She had said she finally felt included rather than accommodated. Each sentence felt like a small miracle unfolding under the bright afternoon light. For Elena, time seemed to fold in on itself. She was no longer just a waitress balancing plates and expectations. She was a bridge. And in that moment, the language she once buried to protect herself became the very thing that connected her to the world again. The son watched closely, his expression changing from surprise to reflection. Power and wealth had given him control over boardrooms, markets, and futures, but he suddenly realized how often his mother had been invisible even in his presence. He saw how relaxed she looked now, how alive. He saw what he had missed. The rest of the meal unfolded differently from any other service that day. Elena did not rush. She explained dishes with gestures, checked comfort with a glance, and made sure the mother was always part of the moment. Other staff watched quietly, something shifting inside them too. The restaurant no longer felt like a place of transactions but of connection. By the time sunlight began to soften through the windows, the table was surrounded by a feeling no amount of money could purchase. Gratitude, humility, and respect filled the air. When the family finally prepared to leave, the son asked Alina to stay for a moment. His voice was calm but deliberate, and the weight of his attention made her nervous. He thanked her not for the service, but for the dignity she had given his mother. He spoke of opportunities, of programs, of making spaces more inclusive. He spoke of change, not as an idea, but as a responsibility. And while he offered resources and support, what mattered most to Alina was something simpler. For the first time since her brother's passing, she felt that the part of her shaped by love and loss had a purpose beyond memory. When they left, the restaurant returned to its gentle daytime rhythm, but Alina did not. She stood near the window for a moment, letting sunlight wash over her face, her hands still warm from movement. Something inside her had shifted permanently. She had been brave without meaning to be, kind without expecting reward, and in doing so she had been seen. Days later, word spread quietly. Managers discussed training. Staff asked questions. Guests noticed changes. Elena was no longer just the shy waitress. She was the reason conversations started. She became the person others looked to when compassion was needed, not because she sought attention, but because she carried understanding with her everywhere she went. As you listen to this story, if it touched something deep inside you, if it reminded you of someone who deserves to be seen or heard, take a moment now to engage with this video. Like it, share it, and let us know in the comments how kindness has shown up in your life when you least expected it. Before we reach the ending, we have a special request for you. Please comment the word kindness below if you believe small actions can still create big changes. Elena never became famous. She never sought recognition. But every time sunlight streamed through those restaurant windows and her hands moved gently through the air, she remembered that day. She remembered that even the quietest person can speak volumes. And she carried forward the truth that in a world full of noise, understanding is the most powerful language of all.